Welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Jan Liva.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here.
Hi.
Hi, Jan.
Today we're going to be talking about, someone asked us a question, I think an interesting one, and we're going to kind of revolve around that question a bit. The question is, if someone can actually be not altered, totally altered with help of hypnosis by some hypnotic interventions, but not actually altered in such a way that you take that was specifically said in the question, that you take something that they have and slightly, help them to develop that or somehow adjust to situations. So not in a matter of utilizing something. The question was if someone can, like the question further developed into another one, can someone's personality can be like erased and then build up from scratches, from the beginning anew? So that was the question that someone asked. What do you think about it?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and it has a lot of parts and a lot of implications. So I'm going to cut to the chase. Researchers have tried and failed to be able to do that. That's the good news. Now, say, for instance, that you're a government and that there's certain people that you want to kill off, and you need somebody to be a mercenary to kill them off. That was the motivation, to see if they could use hypnotic techniques to be able to create a mercenary that would go out and do the job and then forget that they ever did it. Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine that certain governments would be really motivated to be able to have this kind of power. And what they found is that no, it didn't help. It was not a reliable thing to do. What they didn't say in the studies is, well, was there anybody that you were successful to do that with? And if you were successful, how long did it last? Was it permanent or was it temporary? So this is the honesty that I offer, that it's a really important question. And ultimately, it tells me that we need to be responsible in the ways that we work with people, so that the choices that they make are it's coming from them. It's not coming from the outside.
Yeah, when you talk about that, I'm thinking, in terms of those experiments. There was a series on Discovery Channel featuring a guy called Darren Brown, and he's he's that kind of illusionist, and he utilizes various tools, psychological means and stuff, to manipulate people various ways and do that kind of experiments to see if something is possible. And he also actually stated that in an episode called, I think it was called The Assassin, and the question was actually the same: if you can hypnotize someone into such a thing that they would kill someone, that they would be, they would be told to kill someone and they will do it and then totally forgot about the event. And he chose a person based on some tests, and so he was testing generally the suggestibility or susceptibility of that person, and of actually some people, and then chose one with the highest ability to go deep into a trance and actually follow suggestions. And he actually was able to do it, although the claim was made that it was only possible to do it in such a way, to such an extent, with a very highly suggestible kind of person, you know.
Mhm.
So what you said was actually very important. I mean, you know, generally they say it's not possible to do it, but they don't say if there was anyone who they actually
Right.
were able to do it with, and how, for how long. But even then, he did even if he did that, he generally based that on some features or proper, you know, like uh, some characteristics of a person that they already had, like high suggestibility, the ability to absorb in things, and, you know, all other things, all these gifts that are actually making someone a good hypnotic subject, you know. So that's something that they already have. So that's, even this is actually a utilization of something that you already have, and
Mhm.
just, you know, uh, changing the direction slightly, or putting it into another context to work for you in some other ways.
Well, it's the same way that a stage hypnotist picks their people that they're going to do things with on the stage. They're choosing people that are highly hypnotizable,
Yeah.
and they kind of fish for it. And so that, to me, is the question, is more about highly hypnotizable people. And we're here to do good. You know, so what you would do therapeutically with a highly hypnotizable person requires you to be very sensitive. So the statistics are kind of interesting. About 10 to 15% of people fall in the highly hypnotizable range. You know, 15 to 20% are in the low range, where it's hard for them to go into trance. And then 65 to 75% is the rest of us. And of course, there's going to be, you know, those even someone that is like a high average, which is probably what I am. I'm easy to bring into trance and to stay into trance. Everything works on me, but I'm not highly hypnotizable in a way that I get carried away by somebody else's suggestions.
It is you who decides.
It is I who decide. But the over the years, of course, you know, I've seen many clients, and Ernest Rossi, my husband, and I would work together with people. And there's certain characteristics of highly hypnotizable people. And when we had somebody in, you know, in our office that was highly hypnotizable, we became extraordinarily sensitive to make sure that we didn't put any of our input into their trance. And we helped them to understand on different levels that they're highly hypnotizable, so they can get talked into doing things without them properly thinking it through. And I can think of two people in particular, and both of them had been involved in cults. And that they weren't the kinds of cults that everybody killed themselves in the end, or, you know, it wasn't that sort of thing, but they were within cult systems, and they were getting themselves out of the cult system. And so, you know, it's an interesting entree point, you know, of what the person's problem is. And they didn't speak of it that way. I'm getting out of this cult. It was more like, well, you know, I don't right now believe what they're believing, and so I need to create a life of my own. And, you know, and how that goes. And so I think that when you consider to help people appreciate and be able to use their sensitive talents of hypnotizability, but on the other side of it, of recognizing when somebody is manipulating you for their purposes, not for your own good.
Yeah, and while we talk about that, it also highlights another important topic of if someone I got that a lot while I'm working with clients. Many people, when they start working with me in a hypnotic state, one of the questions that they ask at the beginning is if one can be harmed. They don't ask if I can harm them, but if one can be harmed generally in hypnosis.
It's a good question.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, what my answer to that question is, I also go, of course, one can be harmed in hypnosis, or manipulated in hypnosis, like they can be harmed and manipulated without hypnosis as well. Sometimes it's like someone's gonna tell you something somewhere in your life, and it stays with you for like years. One sentence or something like that, and they didn't need hypnosis for it. So
right. Yeah, it's not exclusive to hypnosis.
Yeah, so you can do it in hypnosis, but hypnosis is not the crucial factor in here. So
well, and it is interesting, and certainly physicians are asked to take an oath to do no harm. Psychotherapists aren't. But which I think is always kind of interesting, but it's certainly been a guiding factor for me. And when I think back to some of the cases of the really deep and complicated cases that Erickson worked at, where he used amnesia a lot, so you will not remember, what we did. And he would do that in service of the person. It's a little difficult to describe how that went, but if a person had more things to uncover from their unconscious, he wanted the therapy to stay at that level, but for them to remember the next time that they came into trance. And it's the method is called fractionation. It's where you do a little bit, you like go into trance, come out of trance, go into trance, come out of trance, this sort of thing. And until he knew that this client was strong enough to be able to accept the truth of what was coming up that can be overwhelming. And so he did it in the service of good. And what I tell people who wonder about it, and I'll say, you'll remember everything that's important for you to remember. So you don't have to, when you're in a trance, you don't have to remember everything, because sometimes people work really hard to be able to remember it, and so they limit themselves. But it comes as, can you trust your therapist? Which is a very good question. And how do you trust your therapist?
Sometimes I'm smiling because I remember like one or two instances from my practice when someone said to me at the beginning that they are afraid to go into hypnosis because they are afraid that they are going to tell me something they wouldn't normally tell me, and I go like, what is it then?
Oh, yes, exactly. To have fun with it. And, I agree. And it's not that they're telling you something, it's that they're telling themselves something.
Yeah.
And there are sometimes these buried memories, these buried traumas that are affecting the person, and They want to know, why do I keep making this same mistake all the time? For instance, why do I continually choose the wrong partner in business, or the wrong partner in my life? And in these kinds of instances, it can be helpful to go back into the unconscious and within trance to see if anything surfaces there. And so within the context of that is how one moves forward. So when you look at the special qualities of a person who's highly hypnotizable, because I'm sure there's some listeners that are wondering, am I highly hypnotizable? The first one is there's a really good imagination, particularly visually, a really good visual imagination to be able to create scenarios and, and all of that. And they're able to retain that within their mind's eye. And they also have a tendency to be able to lose track of time within their life, where it's shows itself a lot. It's like, oh, really? We've been talking for 3.5 hours. I didn't realize. People that are like this, and that often they're people pleasers. They want to make you happy. They want to connect with you, and that they can also be easily confused. And so when you're easily confused, you have a tendency to go inside. If someone is wanting to manipulate you, they can figure out how to take you through a mathematical equation where you agree at every step that 1 equals 0. For instance, I was going to look up that equation, but I didn't take the time to do that. But so at every step, well, do you agree with this? Yes, I do. You agree with this? Yes, I do. You agree with this? Yes, I do. Oh, you just agreed that 1 equals 0. And you get to the end of that and you say, no, I don't agree that 1 equals 0. I made a mistake somewhere along the line. And it's that this kind of sensitivity of helping people that are highly hypnotizable is to have a part of them that really can discern at the time, or they can say, excuse me, they walk away for an hour or half hour or whatever, and come to their own mind about it. And the physically, when you're working with somebody, I don't know if I can do it. Do you see my eyes are up like this? They're facing upward.
Yeah, a bit.
And I don't know if you can see the whites of my eyes, but some people, their eyes roll up. You just see the whites. You don't even see the pupil. And that's where Dr. Spiegel worked on an induction called the Spiegel eye roll, which is very effective. And that's one of the ways that you can make a pretty reasonable hypothesis that this is a highly hypnotizable person.
Based on the more they can roll their eyes back, the deeper they can go, as far as I remember.
Yes, and it's very interesting. And so when Ernie and I would see someone in our office and they exhibited the Spiegel eye roll, tendencies, we would then ask them, would you like to experience this interesting induction into hypnosis? We would ask them. That's where you build trust, is to ask. And it's like, that would be interesting. And then the instructions were given. It's like if someone, you want to have them to have an arm catalepsy, and you ask them, is it okay if I lift your arm up and let's see what happens with your arm, because you're going to be touching them lightly at the bottom of their wrist.
Yeah.
So you ask permission.
So you highlight that they are actually in control all the way.
Right, right. And then when you're in the process of a deeper hypnosis, you build in also, you know, and you are in control right now, you know, so that it's that in this way of being able to build trust.
Yeah,
And
mhm. And in this way, you also teach them in a trance somehow to have that control, actually, you know, to not
yeah,
just plainly follow a suggestion or something.
right, right. You know, that's when the inner observer gets welcomed into the room. And is there one part of you that can simply watch what's going on? Simply watch. And, you know, there's no criticism, simply watching. And so there's great comfort when when you're highly hypnotizable and there's a part of you that can just watch and wonder, because you know in the back of your mind, one of the things that you're wondering, am I being manipulated? That's a natural thing. So you've offered this safety of that you really are in control over this. And even when they say, well, but my arm, I can't move my arm. And it's like, really, you can't move your arm? No, I can't move my arm. What about your other arm? Can you move that? Yeah, I'm fine. Well, isn't that interesting that this particular arm is just the way that it is? You know, for just a little while, you time bind it. It's just, you
Mhm.
know, just for a little while and let's see what happens. And then they generally keep their arm up for quite a while as you're doing other things. And sooner or later, their arm comes down. And then when they are back in their full state of awake consciousness, you
Mhm.
ask them to lift up their arm and see how long they can hold it up there. And they say after a few moments, you know, it's really heavy. How did I do that? Well, you were in a different state of consciousness, exploring that which was deep inside you that you're wanting to know.
So in that way, introducing also conscious and unconscious into
Yeah,
the play.
yeah.
So dissociating between these two, and that way one can create a conscious unconscious double dissociation, double bind.
Yes,
And
I can absolutely.
yeah, and by that also teach a person that the burden of responsibility is on them, because if they go, I cannot bend my arm, then there is the conscious and unconscious mind, and it's still him doing that or her doing that. They are
Right,
doing this.
right,
But the question remains if they are doing that on the conscious or unconscious level of volition.
right.
Or
And it's simply interesting. You simply wonder about it. And it's a way of to me, it's a magical way to help people to understand you are more than your linear mind. That there's I think of it as various consciousnesses, and
Mhm.
even what I like to call the quantum conscious. And you know, with quantum, is it a wave or is it a particle? Well, it's both at the same time, and it's impossible for our linear mind to understand that, and yet it exists and it's been proven. And so there's these different facets of each person that are there as resources to come to equanimity, to come to peace, to come to realizations, and to appreciate that the times when you need to dissociate a memory because it was too much for you at the time, a memory, a trauma, this sort of
Mhm.
thing, that in fact, that it was a healthy response. and then just wondering if now is the time for that realization to come forward, or that memory to come forward. And when we do really, deep hypnosis with people, it's about that. It's waking up the different facets of one's various minds. It's not so complicated when you look at it that way.
When you're saying, when you're telling me about that, and about the connecting all this with the qualities of people who are highly suggestible or hypnotizable, I'm thinking, I actually have a question. Would you define hypnosis actually as a state where you have, you as a subject or a client have a more deeper or higher, or more intense, I would say, access to your usual abilities? Because when you say to me, like, for example, someone who is highly hypnotizable have problems keeping up with time. Time goes on, and they are like in a situation so much that they don't know how much time just went by. I'm thinking to myself, that's time distortion, right? So it's a hypnotic
In fact, it
phenomenon.
is. It's one of the characteristics of hypnosis is time distortion.
Yeah.
So
when you say that someone has a like vivid imagination, I'm thinking to myself, it's almost like positive hallucination or hallucinatory ability. So I'm like thinking in terms of, okay, this all can correspond to various hypnotic phenomena, right?
absolutely. And so it's like when a person is highly hypnotizable, they just have these amazing gifts. And so I've worked through a lot of hypnosis definitions, but I still like focused attention and expectancy. It just works for me. So, there's some other characteristics that, Spiegel, I talked about the Spiegel eye roll of when you're looking for someone that's highly hypnotizable, is that there's a readiness for them to trust. They want to trust you. They suspend critical judgment. And there is, they want to connect with you. There's an affiliation, and that he calls it a telescoped sense of time. And I think that might even be a focus of time, and that it's easy for them to accept logical incongruities. So you figure that if you go into trance states, and there's things are not logical in there, that's what leads to the confusion. What's surprising is there's usually an excellent memory. There's an intense ability to concentrate, and there's a rigid core of private beliefs. You wouldn't think that would be true. And that there is this ability of being led. And so some of these are the characteristics that Spiegel had looked for when he was looking for literally a grade 4 to 5 eye roll. And when I look at all of these, I say to myself, ethically, I have to make sure that I am trustworthy. I have to make sure that they have critical judgment, and that they can relate to me, and that I know within trance there's going to be a time distortion, and that I'm going to review with them what is logical and what isn't logical to help them to have an accurate memory. And also with their core beliefs, I'm going to help them question their core beliefs. And when you can recognize these characteristics of high hypnotizability, that's when you can be sensitive to really earn the trust of the person that you're working with. Because, you know, the person that you're working with, they've been duped any number of times because of these qualities that they have. And so they think there's something wrong with them when there's not. It's just this incredible sensitivity to be able to use in a way that best serves the person, instead of having somebody try to brainwash them into their ideas.
Yeah, not even program, but brainwash. Not even
brainwash. I call it brainwash. You know, when and I think this happens a little more often than what we really think about. But there's you know, certain sets of people that they just want to believe a certain thing, and nothing is going to dissuade them from that. And so those are those rigid beliefs. And I just find that fascinating, is that someone wouldn't even want to review their core beliefs.
Yeah. Some people are very attached to some things.
You know, they are. And so I you know, just smile and speak the truth, is that just fascinates me, how hard you're holding on to that. You know, when did that start? Were you an infant? You know, I mean, that sort of thing where, you know, you're going into age regression to see, well, where did that start? And because every child is asked to believe certain things. And then when they get to be a teenager, that's what the rebellion is all about. It's like, wait a minute, was I programmed to believe things that I didn't think through myself because I didn't have that kind of mind? I mean, that's the beauty of teenage rebellion, which I adore. You know, but parents who are being questioned, or teachers, or, you know, religious leaders, or whatever it is, and not realizing that this is central to be able to question your core beliefs, to know who you are and what you believe.
And this is central for being healthy and independent.
Yes, and enjoying life.
Exactly. So summarizing our discussion, is it possible to program, reprogram, and you know, build up any person on the planet from scratch, tearing down the whole personality, erasing everything like on the hard drive, and building everything up, like setting the whole system again from the beginning?
No, no, and no.
I would state the same. I mean, you know, even from a perspective of neurobiology, it would be difficult because, you know, that would mean rewiring all neocortex. I think highly impossible.
Right. And that really you can trust yourself.
Yeah, I would end up with the thing that you can actually do a lot with hypnosis for good, I hope, but it's mainly by the best results I ever saw were done by careful utilization of something that people already have and put them into some better use. Those research.
Yes, and that we offer the opportunity for people to go in and to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
You know, we ask questions instead of telling people what to do. And in this particular way, in having this curiosity and this wonder, oh, you know, you had this tremendous experience. I wonder how you're going to make sense of that. I wonder what's going to come next, and the next things that you think about. I wonder what your early morning thoughts are going to be tomorrow morning, which is a window into your growing edge. I wonder how you're going to use this. To do what?
So very open-ended kind of questioning.
Yes.
Giving people a lot of freedom and creativity and on their part.
Absolutely. So I think it was a really good question that was asked. It's a really sincere question. And hopefully we've sensitively answered this question and honored the people that have asked this question to give our best.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. And thank you, Dr. Kathryn Rossi, for joining me and answering that question for us.
We did it together, Jan.
Exactly.
We answered the question together.
This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.